The house and land at 112 Ocean Avenue in Amityville, on the south shore of Long Island, New York, is one steeped in a history of the paranormal. Looking back, it is not difficult to see why so many met an unfortunate fate on the property. It is a history that involves a considerable amount of anguish, demons, black magic, unexplainable poltergeist-like activity, and brutal murder. Little was known about the quiet house on Ocean Avenue prior to the DeFeo family murder. The house was purchased by one John Mowing in 1924, who tore down a cottage on the property and built a larger Dutch colonial home to accommodate his growing family. A few decades later, it was purchased by one Michael Brigant, who would essentially give the house to the DeFeos. Before going into the murders, it's important to paint a clear picture of Ronald Joseph DeFeo Sr., who was most likely the main reason for, and the first person killed in, the murders. He married Louise Brigant while the two were still teenagers. Louise's parents, Michael and Angela Brigant, both opposed the marriage and cut ties with the couple. However, that only lasted until Ronald Jr. was born, at which point Louise's parents started supporting them in every way possible, giving Ronnie Sr. a job working at their car dealerships. Ronnie Sr. did not make enough money to afford the house he purchased in Amityville, and the only reason they were able to stay there was because of the support they received from Michael Brigant, Louise's father, both from the job and through other large monetary contributions. By all accounts, the members of the DeFeo family were living well outside their means, throwing lavish parties for the employees of the car dealership, installing an in-ground pool, and at one point commissioning a series of oil paintings of the family valued at $115,000 each. Ronnie Sr. was a strict disciplinarian with his children, in particular with his first son, Ronald Jr., for whom he had high expectations. As family members have attested, one minute Ronnie Sr. would be hugging his son, the next minute he would throw him across the room. It's difficult to trust anything that Ronald DeFeo Jr. says at any point during the investigation and trial. He was a troubled youth. Ronald was overweight as a child and frequently picked on. He didn't lose the weight until his later teenage years when he started abusing amphetamines. As we already know, his father was abusive. Ronald Jr. frequently turned to and abused alcohol, marijuana, LSD, and heroin. Ronald Jr.'s temper was on par with that of his father. During the trial, he was formally diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder. His story changed frequently, as did his official defense, from innocent to guilty to insane to under emotional distress. The evening that the bodies were discovered, November 14, 1974, Ronald Jr. walked into Henry's bar in Amityville and spoke with some friends and acquaintances about his concern over not being able to contact his parents. He mentioned that he wanted to check up on them but didn't have a key. He eventually left under the pretenses that he would break into his parents' house. Keep in mind that at this time, Ronald Jr. is 23 and living on his own, also supported by a job through his grandfather's car dealership. He returned to the bar some 10 to 15 minutes later, this time panicking, insisting that his parents had been shot. A small group of people then left Henry's bar in a hurry to confirm what Ronald Jr. already knew. Soon, police investigators and priests would be all over the scene. At first, Ronald claimed his innocence in the matter, insisting that this was the work of a mafia hitman. Given his family's ties to the mob, it seemed a plausible story. While still at the scene of the crime on the night of the murders, Ronald Jr. suggested Louis Fellini might have carried them out. However, Fellini had a solid alibi and was ruled out as a suspect. When further pressured, Ronald Jr. admitted to committing the murders, and upon further investigation, police noted that it would be highly unlikely that one person could have committed all of the murders within the time frame that the events took place. During the trial, Ronald Jr. claimed that his sister, Dawn, was the one insisting on murdering their father. She also suffered from their father's abusive tendencies, as did the rest of the children in the family. In this version of Ronald Jr.'s story, he killed their father and mother, but Dawn killed their other siblings out of fear that they would rat them out. Ronald Jr. thought their deaths were unnecessary, so he shot Dawn in retaliation. According to Ronald Jr., he initially didn't want to go along with his sister's plan, but after drinking and taking illicit drugs with Dawn, she was able to goad him into carrying out the murder. After examining the nightgown Dawn was wearing the night she died, investigators found traces of burnt gunpowder, which might indicate that Dawn had shot a firearm, though forensics later determined that wasn't the case. Much later, Ronald explained in a 1986 interview for Newsday that his mother had killed Ronald Sr. and her other children, but at the time he didn't want to admit that publicly because his great-uncle, Pete DeFeo, was a capo for the Genovese crime family. He worried that any stain he put on the family name would put a target over his head. At one point during the trial, Ronald Jr. pleaded insanity, claiming that he heard voices throughout the house plotting against him, though once again his story was inconsistent and it's hard to determine if this did or did not happen at any point around the time of the incident. Ultimately, Ronald DeFeo Jr. was sentenced with 6 counts of second-degree murder and given 6 sentences of 25 years, which he is still carrying out to this day in a prison in upstate New York. While the murders that took place in Amityville were grisly and may or may not be of a supernatural origin, the story of the house on 112 Ocean Avenue does not end here. The house remained on the open market for just a little over a year after the murders. Being in an upscale suburban neighborhood, the house was expected to sell much faster. The stigma of the murders kept anyone local from buying. Eventually, the price fell to $80,000. Enter the Lutz family. George Lutz was an ex-Marine and land surveyor. Kathy was a housewife with 3 children from a previous marriage. They were originally attracted to the house for its low price despite its prime location in an upscale coastal neighborhood. The Lutzes were aware of the murders but decided as a family that they would be fine living on the property. As a precaution, they brought a priest to bless the house on the day they moved in. Upon entering a bedroom on the 2nd floor, the one belonging to Mark and John DeFeo, 2 of the children killed the year prior, the priest had a strange experience. Of this experience, he said the following: "I was blessing the room. It was cold. It was really cold in there. I'm like, well gee, this is peculiar because it was a lovely day out, and it was winter, yes, but it didn't account for that kind of coldness. I was also sprinkling holy water and I heard a deep voice behind me saying, 'Get out.' It seemed so directed toward me that I was really quite startled. I felt a slap at one point on the face. I felt somebody slap me and there was nobody there." The priest did not mention the experience to the Lutzes but cautioned them not to use that room as a bedroom. The Lutzes heeded his advice and turned the space into a sewing room. But after a few days of living in the house, the Lutzes soon discovered that the priest's blessing did little to abate certain unexplainable negative forces. It only took a few days for members of the family to experience eerie chills. Other oddities began to happen as well. This included foul odors with no source, strange black stains appearing in various locations, as well as the appearance of a green, gelatinous substance. In addition, some members of the family began to exhibit